Although I'm not living in Canada now, I used to. And with all the advertising I see by immigration companies, I often get asked, whether they should move to Canada. And the conversation normally starts with, "You're from Canada. I hear Canada is so nice." Sure, there are good things about Canada, but Canada has some bad. The cold, the car-centric lifestyle, high taxes, and some more recent problems, the worsening economy and the increasing cost of living, particularly housing. Now, many recent problems can be traced to the Trudeau government, but looks like his Liberal Party won't be in power for much longer. I could talk about a lot, but let's just focus on whether Canada can recover financially from the chronic overspending for the past 9 years, and of course beyond, because there was a bit of debt that was inherited as well. But just look at the Canadian dollar and how much stronger it was 10 years ago. And what about GDP per capita? Right? If you look at it, it seems like at the end there, GDP per capita is going down as if Canada's in a recession, just like the 2008 crisis. When we talk about deficit spending, I always think of this moment.
So in this economic climate, how committed to a balanced budget would you be right now? Were you to go into deficit in this current climate to, as you say, put more people to work?
The commitment needs to be a commitment to grow the economy, and the budget will balance itself.
He also said that the deficit spending was temporary, but it wasn't. Now, let's look at a couple of graphs from the Fraser Institute. This first one looks like they actually paid off some debt here if you look at the end. The debt is increasing through Trudeau, but it actually goes down a little bit. That's actually misleading. This graph has been adjusted for inflation. Despite running a $90 billion deficit in 2022, the debt actually looks like it goes down because the Canadian dollar lost so much value because of inflation. Now, let's look at another graph that looks at debt per person to put the numbers in better context. So now Canadians owe about $50,000 per person in federal debt, and that's not even including provincial debt. So it's even worse than this. So the next government will have to, assuming they don't cut taxes, they'll have to cut spending to balance the budget on top of trying to resolve Canada's other problems like housing and immigration. But how much austerity will be needed? Whenever cuts are made, there's always resistance. And for all their promises, politicians rarely come through when it comes to cutting services. So here's a little graph here, a little bar chart with billions of Canadian dollars here. And here's tax revenue in 2023 and spending 2023. Oh, it's only like 8% higher than tax revenue. That looks sort of reasonable. Not that bad. And here is our debt as of March 2024. Ugh. So how are we going to pay all that off when we can't even cover our spending for the year? That's quite the problem. So I have a second chart here, and it starts here with the 2022 deficit, which was $90 billion. And here's the 2023 deficit, which goes with the last chart. You can see the deficits weren't always equal in size, but let's assume the next prime minister inherits something around this size, which is around $35 billion. Now, I decided to put a bar here for 1% of debt and for 5% of debt, because ideally we'd like to pay off the debt, right? We just don't want to have the debt forever. So we have to make payments towards the principal. And if we're paying off 1% of the debt per year, that would take us 100 years to pay off the debt, and 5% of debt per year, that would take us 20 years to pay off the debt. And just to put this in context with the size of the deficits. So if we want a government to balance the budget, they need to get rid of basically 35 billion in spending. And if they want to put 1% towards the debt, or pay off 1% of the debt per year, they have to find another 20 billion in cuts. 20 billion in cuts just to put 1% payment of the debt. That's crazy. But this is what the next government will have to do to basically start paying off the debt. And at least 35 billion if they want to at least balance the budget and not add to more debt. So the next chart here, or bar here, is the interest payments. Look how much we spent in 23-24 on interest payments. $46 billion. If we didn't have interest payments, the budget would be balanced. We're just loaded down with so much debt that we're saddled with these interest payments, which of course are just a waste. If we didn't have these interest payments, we could not only pay off the deficit and have a balanced budget, but we could actually put a little bit towards that debt every year as well. If only we didn't have the debt to begin with. So I put a few things here just to put things into context. A lot of people get mad at how much gets spent, particularly recently, on migrant aid. There have been migrants who've been crossing the border illegally into Canada, and there's a little bit of a loophole that they get processed right away, and they've been getting free shelter, free housing, and free monthly money, monthly checks, and that has irked people. But that's about $8 billion. Remember, we have to cut at least $35 billion. So even if you cut out stuff like that, you still have a lot more to cut. What about military spending? This is all federal military spending. You'd have to cut the entire military to get rid of the deficit and more. Now, this Ukraine spending, most of it has already happened, but that's $12 billion right there. And my thinking is, why are we helping people in another country when Canadians need help, when Canada is not doing well, when we can't balance our budget?
What do we do with that best fiscal position in the world right now? Do we say, okay, we're going to pay down some of our debt and make it even better than already the best? Or we're going to take that money and we're going to invest it in things that are going to help Canadians in this difficult time?
Why are we sending money to foreign countries when we can't even balance our budget, when Canadians aren't doing well? Why? And here is federal payroll. So this is $67 billion. I forget what year this is for. I think it's for 2023 as well. But really it doesn't matter what year. It's all about the same number. And that's, again, $67 billion. So to cover the deficit and our debt, we're looking at $55 billion. So you'd have to basically fire almost every federal employee to start paying off the debt, with the plan of paying it off after 100 years. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if the next prime minister wants to balance the budget and pay off the debt for the benefit of future Canadians, I wouldn't put too much blame on them for the austerity. I would put the blame on the past spenders who got Canada into its current predicament. Anyways, thanks for listening to my rant. Cheers.